I'm not saying it will ruin our collection or it will add to our collection. I'm just curious to hear what you guys think. Also, I'm curious to see how something like this will have an effect on the NFT world and collecting. So with this article specifically, it touches home with VEVE because we actually have collected Steamboat Willie. Now, this being just one of the old IPs that it can potentially go into public domain next year, meaning being open to the public to use. But then also there's a bunch of other old original nostalgia things that we might collect, and we might not ever think of the fact that it can go into public domain. And how will that alter the perspective of collecting something that is now in public domain? What's good, everybody? It's CryptoCrayons here. This is a cool concept I wanted to bring to everybody's attention. As you know, I like to basically touch on topics that are in close proximity to what we do over at VEVE as collectors when it comes to IP, augmented reality, NFTs, and things of that nature. The videos I make are usually, different from your traditional VEVE YouTuber, I guess, but definitely falls under the same umbrella. So I know we do talk about IP, intellectual property, and copyright laws and things like that. We talk about NFTs as well as IP when we talk about VEVE, right? So this is an article from earlier this year, but I have heard about this story a lot, not necessarily pertaining to Mickey Mouse copyright, which is what this is about, but just about certain IPs entering into public domain. For the people that don't know what public domain is, let's go ahead and look that up really quick. Public domain consists of all the creative work to which no exclusive intellectual property rights apply. Those rights may have expired, been forfeited, expressly waived, or may be inapplicable. Because no one holds the exclusive rights, anyone can legally use or reference those works without permission. I think there was an NFT project that came out that used Mona Lisa as an NFT.
The Mona Lisa is actually coming to the NFT space. This is actually quite crazy.
Then there's other like collectible apps that has certain paintings that are also in public domain, which means like, anyone can really use it, which also made people think like, okay, well, if anyone can use this, what makes it special? Like, why would I buy, this Mona Lisa if it's in public domain and anybody can use it?
The most famous painting in the world, currently valued at a whopping $876 million, holding the Guinness Book of World Records for the highest insurance value of any painting in history. Yet somehow I managed to sell it. How was I able to sell the most iconic, recognizable painting in history? 2 words: public domain.
Right. So if you've been purchasing outside of VEVE, the conversation about intellectual property has been much different. At VEVE, the IP conversation is more so based off of some of the world's most famous IPs, that actually comes with like nostalgia. Outside of VEVE, the IP conversation still exists, but it's for new brands, for example, like a Disney or a Mickey Mouse, but in the beginning stages, in the early stages. So like in the early stages of like a Steamboat Willie or something like that, before the actual franchise really builds out. So you take say Bored Ape Yacht Club, for example, one of the well-known NFTs, and that was something popular with them. They actually gave people the intellectual property rights to whichever NFT they had.
Yuga Labs announced that the IP rights for CryptoPunks and Meebits have been released. So this means that owners of the NFTs can now use the IP in personal or commercial projects. Yuga Labs still owns the IP, but are exclusively licensing the right to use the artwork as long as the NFT is held by an individual holder.
You've seen a lot of people creating clothing lines, different kind of marketing companies, restaurants, and all these different kinds of things based off of the IP rights of their NFT. After that trend kind of ran its course, and remember, this is all taking place outside of the VEVE realm, and it's very important to specify that because there's this world of collecting that exists within VEVE that doesn't exist outside of VEVE. But I also feel like the world that exists within VEVE as far as collectors go, technology that we deal with, we are ahead of all other NFT projects, including the likes of a Bored Ape Yacht Club, a Moonbirds, or a CryptoPunk or something like that. That's a whole nother video. I really just want to talk about IP, but when you think about, say, Moonbirds, for example, there started being projects that began to release that basically said, okay, we don't want to specify who can use the IP of this NFT project. We actually want to make it public domain. which is CCO.
Essentially what Kevin Rose said is that the team feels strongly that this space is heading in the direction of CC0, and that if they are jumping the gun on this opportunity and really figuring out how to take full advantage of it, that it's going to be a net win for the entire ecosystem. Kevin Rose made one more point, basically saying that he doesn't think that the old way of commercial rights that takes place with lawyers and people in the physical world is going to translate into this metaverse Web3 ecosystem, right? It's just like this kind of ownership and stuff like that has to be determined on chain and figured out on chain. So I thought that was an interesting point as well.
So we started to see a lot of CCO conversation happening, public domain conversation happening. And I think that's perfect for this article. So let me jump into it. It says, the Mickey Mouse copyright runs out in 2024. What does that mean for all of us? Now, I'm curious to hear what you guys think, so please drop your comments below. This conversation about certain IPs and copyrights expiring, and then from that expiration going into public domain, which allows creatives to actually make renditions or different versions of the IP and use their own creative ability, but actually release these things without having to deal with some kind of crazy copyright infringement. With this article specifically, I think it touches home with VEVE because we actually have collected Steamboat Willie. Now, this being just one of the old IPs that it can potentially go into public domain next year, meaning being open to the public to use. But then also there's a bunch of other old original nostalgia things that we might collect, and we might not ever think of the fact that it can go into public domain. And how will that alter the perspective of collecting something that is now in public domain? I'm not saying it will ruin our collection or it will add to our collection. I'm just curious to hear what you guys think. Also, I'm curious to see how something like this will have an effect on the NFT world and collecting. So 2024 will specifically pull Steamboat Willie, the barn dance, and that original design of Mickey Mouse into the public domain in terms of copyright laws. 2024 will be a good news / bad news year for the Walt Disney Company and its favorite mouse, Mickey. The copyright that has prevented others from using Mickey Mouse on their products and media runs out in 2024. That means that you, me, and the rest of the world can begin using the world's most recognized rodent without getting permission or paying licensing fees. There are, however, some caveats. Disney's trademark will still be protected, as unlike copyrights, they have no time limit. Therefore, it is possible that you may not be able to use the name Mickey Mouse, but it's okay to use the image. Also, elements of Mickey's appearance will still be protected. For example, Mickey did not wear those white gloves until 1925. Accordingly, you will have to wait a year to include them. It will therefore be important to stay close to the representation of Mickey Mouse as he appeared in 1924. Another area of caution is around the use of color. The 1924 Mickey Mouse was black and white. He did not appear in color until 1935. As a result, we may have to wait for 2035 until we can begin creating color renderings. So, starting at the end of 2024, you can be creative with Mickey Mouse. Just be careful to speak with a trademark and copyright expert before you do. Something that I think we should all pay attention to. I mean, I could even jump into another article from last year in August around the same subject. It says Batman, Superman, Mickey Mouse, and even Bugs Bunny are entering into public domain. Most notably for the toy industry, these public domain characters include Mickey Mouse, Superman, Winnie the Pooh, Bambi, Batman, and Bugs Bunny. Before you begin placing Batman logos on your toys, however, be mindful that the freedom to use these characters is limited to how they looked when they first appeared. And remember, we do collect first appearances, and then we collect first appearances on the app, and then first appearances on the blockchain and things of that nature. If you guys remember, a couple years ago or last year maybe, there was this like horror Winnie the Pooh movie that came out, kind of like a bloody version of Winnie the Pooh, and it was like some kind of serial killer that lived in the woods. But that's a perfect example of like Winnie the Pooh entering into public domain, and since it entered into public domain, it allowed people to basically use Winnie the Pooh however they want to. I mean, you could even see on the Forbidden app Quid, you could see how they re-released some kind of Winnie the Pooh concepts, but It's literally because Winnie the Pooh is now in public domain. So it's no longer an IP that they have to go and talk to the original owners to see if we can now use Winnie the Pooh. As long as you stick to the original creations of it, they're able to make whatever they want. But let's continue. You can use this image, which is the original Winnie the Pooh, right? Drawn in 1926. But you can't use this Winnie the Pooh. You could use this Winnie the Pooh. And then like you could use this Mickey Mouse before the white gloves, but you can't use this Mickey Mouse. And the reason I think that it's something interesting to think about is because when we think about NFTs, we want to collect first appearances. We want to collect the originals, like the first Marvel comic book or the first DC comic book or the first Batman, the first Spider-Man, the first appearance in the DC universe, in the Marvel universe, in the Disney universe. And those are usually the oldest ones, and those are usually the ones that are going to enter into public domain first. In case you are interested in Superman, realize you can use the original inelegant S, but you don't get to use the logo to which we have all become accustomed. And forget about Lex Luthor, at least for now. He will not be available until 2030. Batman's image has also changed since its inception. He didn't have those cool gloves and appeared to be wearing wings rather than a cape. And if you look closely, you can see he's wearing a gun. You will have to wait a few years, but the Looney Tunes characters will become available in the 2030s. Daffy Duck in 2033, Bugs Bunny in 2035. Elmer had a red nose and Bugs had more elongated face than he does today. It's the beginning of a new era. Use these characters, but double check with your attorney before doing so. The major studios will be watching very carefully in how they will move forth to do pull some kind of legal strings to like corrupt the system to make sure that these characters are protected in all of its glory and stuff like that, and no one's able to use it. So especially with NFTs, I think things can really get out of hand. But much love and respect. I mean, what another perspective is, people feel like the corporations are holding these artworks hostage because the actual artist that created them has passed on, and they're now being held hostage by the actual big corporations, right? And when you look into public domain and how copyrights expire, it ended up being like, these numbers aren't verbatim, but it ended up being something like, after 35 years after the artist dies, then the artwork goes into public domain and anybody could use it. Then a corporation came out and made some kind of argument with a lawsuit or something, and then it gets protected even more. So then it's like, 70 years after the artist died, then it goes into public domain. And then it's like, 100 years after the artist died, then it goes into public domain. So there's so many strings that are being pulled for corporations to protect this artwork that they've actually built their empires off of. But I just thought it was something interesting to bring to everybody's attention. You may or may not know about it. If you don't, you do now. Much love, respect. Peace, peace.